Thanks for joining on this special episode that I'm doing with my friend Amy. She's been a friend of mine for close to 2 decades, I'd guess. She's been a good friend, and I've kept up with her on Facebook. We live, 10 hours apart or so. And, we'll kind of keep up with each other on social media. And she's been doing a lot about parenting and whatnot. And parenting in Christianity is incredibly important. Before I get started back in the Gospel of John, I want to just touch on a few things really about salvation and leading your children to Christ and the best way to do that. So you've been a parent for, 8 years, and, you have a calling to just help other parents out. Not that you know everything, but you've had some experience. You've had some experience teaching some others. So just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my name is Amy, and I was a special education teacher before I changed avenues into parent coaching. So I taught in the public school system for almost 15 years. The first half was first grade, and the second half was children with autism and related disabilities, grades K through 5. And then I became a parent myself, few life changes, fast forward, and here I am now, shifted my passion from teaching children to teaching parents how to raise their children.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump into it, and we'll see if we got any questions along the way.
So I am not a Bible expert, but I'm very passionate about parenting and helping parents align their intentions to their parenting actions and passing down values to their children. And like a lot of parents, especially Christian parents, right, my faith is really valuable to me, and it's something I want to instill in my child. With my experiences, I know that I can't lead my child into an authentic relationship with Christ and have him understand the purpose of the gospel if I use fear and control or manipulation or punishment in order to do it.
That's an excellent observation. One of the things that I look at is, perfectionism, of where we just kind of, we almost have this high expectation of our child that, we don't even meet ourselves. And then we try to guilt them or shame them into doing the right thing. And in reality, guilt really just hinders us. It stops us, and it just makes us feel ashamed for what we've done, and then we just want to hide in the corner. It's kind of like guilting somebody that's coming to church is like, oh, well, you drank alcohol last night and you got drunk off your mind. You shouldn't come to church today. And you just, oh, I feel so terrible and I feel guilty, and it stops us from doing stuff. Whereas conviction enables us to repent and turn from our sin.
Yeah, and I think that when you're talking about that guilt, that, we're placing that on our children, that is not a fruit that comes from Christ.
Right.
Because like you said, Christ is going to provide conviction and encouragement, a passion, a driving force to change behavior. Whereas sinful behavior, it wants to hold us back. The devil wants to put those in place to make you feel shameful. And whenever we take on that responsibility to shame our children, no amount of guilt or shame is going to turn their hearts to do better. It's only, like you said, kind of going to keep them hidden and push them back down into that hole that they can't escape.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I think we need to be very careful when we're parenting that we stay calm. Because it's very easy for us to have this high expectation of our child of my child should never do anything wrong. My child should never even, I can't believe they even thought about doing that. And here's the thing that we need to realize as people. We're all sinners. Our nature is to sin. I don't know about you, Amy, but I have not had to teach my kids how to lie. I have not had to teach my kids how to cheat and steal. I have to teach them how not to do those things.
Yeah, because they'll come up with it. And every time that you think you've got a handle on something, your kid's going to one-up you. They're going to level up. They're going to get to that next level of misbehavior. But they can't avoid it because we are born of a sinful nature. And so whenever we are committing to our parenting, we have to realize that we're parenting a being that is incapable of not being sinful.
Right.
They are incapable of being perfect.
Right.
As are we. And for us to expect that, it's going to let everybody down. And it doesn't lead them to Christ to feel comfortable to take their imperfections and say, yeah, this is me. I do struggle with this.
Yeah.
Dear God, instead they are going to become guilt-ridden and shameful. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, especially if you've grown up, in certain environments, certain Christian schools, certain very traditional parenting households.
You mentioned how you grew up, and those things take an impression on you, and it also impresses how we teach our kids and how we disciple them. How did that go for you? How did you grow up?
So I grew up in a private Christian school from K through 10th grade. And so I was taught for years about Jesus. I was reading the Bible. We were singing hymns. I was doing the chapel. I was being careful to be very good and not to sin and things like that. And it took years of me being out of that situation to realize that I didn't know anything about Jesus, not about him, not about how he cared about me.
Yeah, it was all about good morals.
Exactly. It was
and what's funny is good morals are about us. And Christianity has nothing to do with good morals. That is not our goal. Our goal is not to teach good morals. It got on my nerves whenever I was teaching the Bible, and they're like, why don't you teach good morals? And I'm like, no, I'm teaching Jesus, which as a fruit will produce good morals. And that's what you want. You want something that produces that good fruit and produces good morals, not just teaching this strict, this is what you do, these are the do's and don'ts, because you will fail. Right. That's what the law is. The law of the Old Testament is all do's and don'ts. And it was all to show that you cannot do this on your own.
Yeah, the whole purpose was to show that those are the reasons we need a Savior. Is because there is no amount of great teaching or great parenting that is going to remove the sin. And we're always going to fall short, no matter how our efforts are. Which is why when I wanted to prepare talking to you about this, is that perfectionism, that legalism of, well, if I just do, that really doesn't cultivate a relationship with Christ. And it took years after being in an environment that was all about Christ for me to actually understand how to have a relationship with him. And that is what I want to save my child from, that amount of time not knowing Jesus.
Yes.
I want him to know him more fully and sooner than I did.
Right. And, if Christianity, if we make Christianity about the do's and the don'ts and just morality, then we will shift from a grace-based salvation to a works-based salvation. And that is detrimental for all of us, because we will fail miserably.
And that's where I want to draw the parallel. You just said, we'll be shifting from grace-based relationship to a works-based relationship. And without knowing it, a lot of us are cultivating a works-based relationship with our children.
Yes.
And I want to help parents shift to a grace-based relationship, because we are the first picture they're going to get of Christ. We are the first viewing they're going to have of understanding what love looks like, what an authority figure looks like, what a fearless leader looks like, what grace looks like, what love looks like. And we get to be that picture. And when our children interact with us, we want to be pointing to Christ.
Right.
And we can do that through our parenting methods.
Yeah. I want to be careful because, and I agree with everything that you just said, but this doesn't mean that we don't teach obedience. This doesn't mean that we have a license to sin or disobey. Romans 3:8 basically says, if you have that type of attitude of, I'm just going to go do whatever I want because God will forgive me anyway, then your condemnation is justified. So there's this balance of, yes, we have grace. And does that mean we should sin more so that grace can increase? No. But that's what you're talking about, from what I understand. Is that right?
Yeah. So grace-based parenting is not about permitting your child to sin more, or giving them a license to disobey or to, be disrespectful, or all the things that trigger us as parents, right? And grace-based parenting doesn't just mean we look at it and we go, and we look away, right? Yeah. We have a very important role as parents. We have been placed as this parent to discipline this child, to guide, and to teach, and to hide their sins under the rug, or to just chalk it up to, well, they're just a kid. They don't know any better. They don't do. While those kinds of things are true, that doesn't dismiss the fact that they need to be brought up. When I work with parents, I work to give them an approach that is going to align with the values that they want to pass down, whether that's respect, responsibility, faith, safety, connectedness, friendship, loyalty, whatever the case may be. And the fact of the matter is, you can't do that by shaming them, guilting them, or berating them into behaving better. You have to show them the way that Jesus shows his disciples the way. And we've been put in that same position to do for our children.
You know, it's funny. Just the thought came to my head. Parenting and disciplining is nowhere in, well, guilting and shaming. I would not compare this to torture, but I'm going to, just because it's interesting. It's like when you torture somebody. If you torture somebody, they will do whatever. They will tell you whatever you want, and they will do whatever you want just to get you to stop. It's the same thing with guilting and shaming. They will tell you whatever you want to do. Like, oh yeah, I'm saved. Yeah, I'm a believer in Jesus. I told my kids, I said two things. There were two things that I wanted to hear from my kids. Number one, I want them to tell me one day that they have received Christ and they are believers and they are saved. I absolutely want to hear that. But what I absolutely don't want to hear is that they're saved when they're not. I don't want them to say, oh yeah, I'm a believer in Jesus, because you know that's what I want you to do. I absolutely do not want that. I want you to seek out truth, because there are so many people that are under what I call a peer pressured proclamation, where essentially they grew up and, you know, they're in fourth grade and all their friends are saved, and it's like, ooh, I better go do this, because, you know, and people are starting to look at me. I'm the only one who hasn't gone up to the altar to get saved. I better go do this. Or brothers and sisters, you know, I'm the only one that hasn't done it. Like, I better just go do this, and they just do this meaningless action. Yeah, it's absolutely a show, instead of actually coming to know Jesus.
Yeah, then again, we're bringing back this performance. I'll be accepted if I do this. Yeah. They'll like me more if I do this. They'll be proud of me if I do this. And what I want parents to shift towards doing is what Jesus does for us. He says, come as you are.
Yeah.
All alike, come as you are. And I want our children to come to us and say, I really screwed up, or I don't know Christ. Help me understand. But they can't do that if we haven't fostered a connection, a safe relationship where they can be authentic and not worry about the burden of perfectionism.
Well, how often do you see, I knew when I was growing up, I saw it all the time with my friends. It's like, my dad is going to kill me. And I mean, there was no trust with that parent. It was like, I want my kids to be able to come to me and say, Dad, I did something really, really bad, and I don't know what to do. And I need to be careful, because they may say something that triggers me, that makes me just super angry, and I need to keep myself calm and walk them through it. And just the fact that they're coming and admitting it to me is huge. But how often do we see people that they admit their sin and then they get berated for it? It's like they're confessing their sin. I guarantee you, people that confess their sin openly like that, they have beaten themselves up more than you could possibly imagine. Because they can't stand it. And what they need from you is help. They don't need chastisement. They don't need you to guilt trip them or put shame on them. They need you to guide them through whatever mistake that they just made.
Yeah, and parents don't need to be our children's first bully.
Yeah.
That's just straight up how it is. We don't need to be that person. There's plenty of them out there. We don't need to be that person, because Jesus isn't that for us. Right? I can take whatever I need to Jesus.
Yes.
And he's yet to smite me. You know what I mean? Like, he's not coming after me.
Right.
In a malicious way. He's coming after me. He's chasing after me to hold on to me, to bring him closer. You know, he's not scaring me. I know that I can trust him. And I want parents to know that you can cultivate that with your child, so that they are running to you. And when they run to you, guess who you're pointing to? Right?
Exactly.
But you're the medium. Until they have an authentic relationship with Christ on their own, we are the medium to show them what a connected, trustworthy, safe relationship looks like. And that's not permission to run about and do intentional sinning. We're not promoting going out and intentionally sinning because we know mom won't care. No, that's not the case. We are cultivating children who learn to be accountable without being burdened by shame so that they can take that problem to Jesus.
Yeah.
And understand what a whole deep relationship actually looks like, no performing involved.
Yeah. And, children are supposed to be obedient to their parents, just like we're supposed to be obedient to God.
If we're not modeling it, we should not be expecting it. It's a big thing for me. If you're not modeling it, you should not be expecting it.
Yeah.
And if you want to expect it, you have to shift first.
You have to, you're continually working on yourself. We see this in discipleship with what we see in the Bible. And it talks about make disciples who make disciples. The first people that you should be discipling are your children. That is discipleship 101. Your kids. If you're out discipling somebody else and evangelizing to other people, but you're not discipling your children, you're wrong. You are 100% wrong.
It's kind of like we were literally given this assignment.
Yeah,
God was like, here's the assignment. Focus on this. And they give you, he gives you 1, 2, 3, however many children, I have a friend who, she has 4 children and she was fine with the 2. And she always complained about, or sometimes still does about, man, this parenting is really hard. Jesus, help me with this parenting. Boom. Number 3. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I had 3 kids. Dear Lord, please, I'm such an impatient parent. I need to X, Y, or Z. Boom, number 4. She has 4 children now. Like, she asked. Jesus gave her the assignment. Here you go. This is how you will strengthen.
Yeah.
Talk about real life application to just, plop a few more kids in there. There you go.
Oh yeah, the more kids, it's so funny because you got the one kid and you're like, okay, this is tough. Oh my, your first kid, and it's like, oh my goodness. And you get your second one, you're like, we got this. And then you have your third one, like, what happened? This is not okay. Why are we outnumbered?
And that's how you will be sharpened.
Yep, and that's how you'll be sharpened.
That's how you'll be sharpened and refined. There's no other way to do it than to be surrounded by your children, having been given this task.
Well, when you pray for patience or you pray for God, hey, Lord, teach me how to do this. He doesn't give you this little orb of patience and it's like la-di-da and I consume it and I'm patient now. No, he gives you sandpaper. He gives you somebody that you're going to have to learn to be patient around. You're literally praying for long suffering. Lord, give me long suffering. Like that's literally what you're praying for.
He doesn't give you results. He gives you opportunities.
Oh, yes. Oh, very,
you
very
either
good.
have opportunities to keep operating the way you have been, or you have that opportunity to shift the way you're operating. And so he's not going to give you easy people to be patient with. He's going to give you opportunities to hone that skill. And he's a bit humorous that way. So,
yeah. And look, parenting is not easy by any means, whether you have 1 child or 10 children. It is not simple. And I'm sure, you're a parenting coach. I'm sure that you don't have the, parenting in a bottle and here you go. And this will work for everyone. I'm sure it's an individual case by case basis. And you're like, okay, this is what you're doing with your child. Let's try this. It's coaching. It's not selling a product. Here's a bottle and we'll fix your parenting in a bottle. That's not what this is. It's I like that it's called coaching because it's guiding someone to being a better parent. And the answers aren't always as simple as if they do this, do this. There's so many other variables that aren't mentioned that have to be examined.
And dare I say that is like discipleship. Like
it is.
When we go to Jesus for answers, he doesn't plop down an answer. He plops down for us these opportunities. And when I work with parents, like a lot of people are turned away that there's not just one answer how to do it. I just want the fix. Well, the magic isn't in the answer.
It's not magic.
Right. It's in the coaching. And whenever you're in the coaching, you start to realize with your children, the magic is in the connection. Because without the connection, you cannot get the cooperation. And without cooperation, you cannot manage the behaviors and improve them. A lot of parents, they just want to do the end part. They just want to make the behavior better.
Right.
But
instant gratification.
yeah, yes, it's everywhere, right? In everything that we absorb, we're getting it right away. And honestly, that's not how Jesus works if we know
Nope.
anything about his timing. And it's really not how parenting works either. And you are going to get those one-offs where you're like, "Oh, it worked. Great, perfect." That happens. But those are short-term things. And what I want to work for with parents is we're going long-term here.
Yeah.
We're looking to the future. We're raising children of the future, children who are going to be warriors of Christ, children who are going to be the Samaritans out there helping our broken world.
Right.
And we don't want to send out a bunch of entitled tyrants to do it. We want to send out caring, empathetic, loving, accepting children to go out there to do God's work, to be a vessel for God's work. And when you're hardened, it's hard for Jesus to do that because you haven't opened up to allow him in. And that is something that we have to do. We have to open up to allow him in. And we can prime our children to being those moldable vessels for him.
Mm-hmm. I like how you mentioned being hardened and having a hardened heart because, another good word for that is being stubborn. We don't always have a stubborn heart in every aspect of our lives. We have it in certain areas where we don't want to mess with. We like how it goes and we don't want to mess with it. And you may like to hate how it goes. It's just like with parenting is a really good example because, all right, I'm just yelling at my kids all the time. Not that you enjoy doing it, but you don't want to change because you're being stubborn. And in reality, yelling at our children isn't really doing anything. And it's so funny because my kids have gotten on to me for being stern. And they're like, stop yelling. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't yell at all. And we actually sat our kids down and we're like, okay, nobody get upset. Everybody's okay. But I want to show you the difference between a stern voice and yelling. Okay. And this is what we did it. We're like, okay, so do we yell at you? No. Like, exactly. Like, having a stern voice is important to have, but also a gentle one as well.
Yeah, it's really funny. So I'm not a yelling parent. Not to say that I haven't been a yelling person in the past because I have been.
But I've absolutely yelled, but I try not
to. And that's the best. That's what you can do, right? Because we're not perfect here, and right. I'm also not here to demand that parents get perfect or that they start to be perfect because that's really beside the point. And I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit. But I had my kiddo had a very similar experience. This was a while back. He wasn't getting in the shower for whatever reason. It was just it was in that phase where they have been bathing for years and then suddenly they hate bathing.
Yeah, our kids
we were in that phase. Thank God it has passed, but we were in it for a while. And I was like, I don't know. I said, you need to get in the shower. It's time to wash up. We got to move on. And he perceived that I was yelling at him. And that was a really difficult thing for me because, and I talk a lot about this with parents, like children's perceptions are valid. Oh, and I could go on. I had to humble myself in that moment. I did not physically yell with my voice. My child perceived me yelling. My method was perceived by him in that way. I need to change my method. So I changed my method. I ended up realizing like, okay, I was standing. We were in an echoey bathroom. I was hurrying him. So if we think about less about the way yelling sounds and more about how it feels, then I was able to make sense like, oh, it probably felt intimidating, like he was smaller than me, like he had less ownership. And that was the way that I had come across. I had put myself above him, and I had made it, that interaction, even though it was just me telling him, dude, it's time to get in the shower. That the way I came across to him, it did not come across gentle in his perception. And I had to shift that. And whenever we talk about, you talked about using a stern voice versus yelling, I've had to have a similar conversation with my son. You do not deserve to be yelled at. Also, there are times when I need to get something across urgently. And
Right.
I need to have a sense of urgency. And that is going to be any time that there's a safety concern
Yeah, exactly.
or something immediate
Right.
needs addressing. I said, my voice may sound like this. And we practice, here's what my urgent voice will sound like. This is yelling. You do not deserve to be spoken to this way. That is different than a sense of urgency needing to be conveyed to you. And it also just kind of empowered him that, hey, there's going to be times when you need to use your urgent voice too. And there are times for urgency, and that doesn't mean that someone, deserves to be berated. They're totally separate.
And, I like what you said about the perception of the child is valid. You didn't say reality, but you said valid. Because I've heard it for years. Perception is reality. No, it's not. Reality is reality, regardless of how you perceive it. However, perceptions are valid, and I think that's how we should treat. And I think some people that say perception is reality, they mean valid, because we do need to listen to others. And we're like, oh, I didn't realize that you thought that I hated you, or whatever. I didn't mean to sound like that I was yelling. I didn't mean for me to sound like I was intimidating you or whatever. Those perceptions are valid, so we need to discuss those and talk through those. And sometimes we need to shift. Sometimes the child needs to shift. Sometimes we both need to shift. And it's important that we don't keep our houses so black and white. Everything is either right or wrong. There is some gray area. I think it's dangerous when we have some people that say there's only black and white and there's no gray. And there's other people that say there's only gray areas and no black and white. And it's like, okay, you're both wrong. There are things that are absolute black and white, and there are things that are in a gray area. There are both, and you have to meet those things where they're at and work on those things.
And acknowledging that there's not just black and white, but there's also gray, that is when the brain gets to experience growth.
Right.
And that's whenever we are challenged outside of our fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. And we are humans. Our nature is to black and white think. Well, and the challenge is to become more flexible and realize that there's this whole gray area that we have only begun to tap into.
Exactly.
Right? And I want to bring up a quick point when you said, sometimes we need to say to our kids or to people, oh, I didn't intend to come across yelling. I didn't know I was presenting that way. That's accountability.
Yeah.
That's how our kids are going to learn accountability. Right. That our actions, regardless of our intentions, our actions affect other people. That doesn't mean that we have to tiptoe around other people. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be ourselves around other people. It's just simply showing we have an effect. Our actions, our words, the way we come across, and the way we're perceived is valid for that person. And when we show our children, oh man, I did not intend to come across that way. Let me try that again. And we try it again with more grace or more awareness or more consciousness. Our child is seeing that, oh, when I screw up or when I hurt someone's feelings, I need to rewind and let me try that again and align that with who I am.
A lot of parents end up being very arrogant in their parenting of where they don't want to ever admit when they're wrong. And nobody likes to admit when they're wrong. It's not fun, but it is absolutely arrogance. And if we can't admit that we're wrong, how can we expect our children to admit when they're wrong? So that opportunity that you were talking about where we could just come to our children and say, hey, I'm sorry, I should not have yelled or I didn't mean to come across that way either way, and be apologetic and teach our children true apologies. That's where we're going to be most effective in our discipleship.
Yeah, and I think that's where their repentance, how they're going to learn to say, oh, that was icky of me. Mm-hmm. Let me rectify this. And knowing that we are not perfect creates a safe space for them realizing that, oh, they're not perfect either. I'm not so alone anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because,
man.
Way at the beginning, we talk about children will do whatever it takes to be accepted.
Right.
Whether it's good, bad, real, fake, they want to be loved and accepted. And to know that we are like them And then to know that Jesus spent time down here with people like us. Oh, you're like me. You
Yeah.
understand me. And that just allows that trust to grow, because they realize that pedestal that adults are on, or that, no, that doesn't exist. Like, we're
Right.
all on the same playing field. Okay. We're all doing this life. We're all figuring it out.
Yep.
And, and just giving them that safe space to say that, hey, I mess up too, and hold me accountable. If there's something my child is good at doing, it is holding me accountable. And the funny thing about kids is that when they're going to hold you accountable, which they will, they don't have a lot of tact about it when they're
No, they
younger.
don't.
Okay. But we just have to realize that comes with maturity and practice.
Right.
But I am so thankful when my kid calls me out on something, because if I did something that doesn't align with who I am or who I know I can be, then I want to redo. Like, that didn't align with my values. And you notice that. Like, that sin, no, I don't want it, don't like it. Pardon me.
Right.
And I'm gonna go try to right that wrong. I'm gonna, I want to rectify that. And that's how our kids learn accountability, and that's how they learn to be humble. Like, oh shoot, I messed up. Time to fall on my sword, and it's hard. But if we show them that we have to do it, and we can do it, and we survive, they can do it too.
Exactly. That's good.
Okay, so you had mentioned apologies, and children aren't very good at giving apologies. I truthfully don't know a lot of adults that are good at giving apologies either.
They give it a lot of empty ones.
Yes. And so whenever we have done something wrong towards our children, that is a perfect opportunity to model what a genuine repair looks like. I almost don't even want to use the word apology, because then that kind of demands an I'm sorry. And I'm just not about that. I want to repair the relationship. Okay. And 2 words, I'm sorry, it's not going to repair what has been broken. So the opportunity we gain when our children sin allows us to model how to repair that broken relationship, and not only teach them about God's forgiveness, but teaching them to be accountable for their actions and to repair the damage that they have done in their relationships.
Right.
And the sins we commit against our children, they're going to happen. So we'll have plenty of opportunity. And we get to show our children what it looks like to humble ourselves, set aside our ego, admit our wrongdoing, and work on rectification. And this is so important because, as you probably guessed, I hate an empty sorry. I don't require sorries in my house. I didn't ask for them in the classroom. I don't force my son to apologize to me or to friends. Because when I was a teacher, I just heard just useless apologies. Like, they don't do me any good. The behavior doesn't get any better. I mean, it's literally just, let me check this box and make you happy and move on.
It's just words. It's nothing else. There's zero action to it.
If we quickly relate this to Christ, when you say, oh, Jesus, come into my soul, I believe in you. Like, those are just words, right?
Yep.
They're useless. We need intention behind our words. The apologies that I would get were only to get out of trouble or to check that box, right? But there was no accountability of how their actions affected either me or another person. So a sorry really does you no good. What we really want is the other person to take accountability for their actions and for them to put in effort to repair the damage they caused.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really much less about the words, and it's more about, hey, acknowledge that you played a part in this. Now put forth effort to show me that you want to reconnect, that you want to repair this, and then we'll have something to work with. Yeah.
I like how you compared it to salvation, and the thing that comes to mind is the prayer that you're told, pray this prayer and then you're good to believe it in your heart, whatever that means. I'm sure you did it. I did it. And tons of people that are going to listen to this have done it. I mean, and it's just empty words. I love that you made that comparison. But on those apologies, it's just words that we say. It would be like me telling my wife, hey, I love you, but I leave all my dirty clothes all over the place and I yell at her. I never do anything around the house. And, I don't actually show her that I love her. No one's going to believe me that I love my wife if I don't show her that I love her by doing things for her and pursuing her.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with apologies. We have to show that we're apologetic. It's a Bible word, repentance. Turn from your sin, confess it. This is what I did wrong, and turn from it. And honestly, repentance is not a one-time thing. It is a daily, sometimes hourly thing that we do, where we constantly try to turn from our sins. And sometimes we turn back to it, and then we turn back around and say, no, I don't want to do that. And it's the same with our apology. And I love how you talked about how we have to apologize to our children whenever we do stuff wrong. It shows them how to do it. How are they supposed to learn anything? How do they learn how to hold a fork and eat? How do they learn how to speak? By watching and observing you.
Yeah.
So that puts kind of a high mark on us, doesn't it?
It so does. And I feel like, when parents are listening, or when I'm talking to parents, they're immediately like, oh gosh, well, another to-do list of things that I'm doing wrong, another list of things I have to do it right. But there's grace for parents too.
Yeah.
To not have to be burdened with being a perfect parent, because it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter if you're in the Bible every day. It doesn't matter if you're a parenting coach. You are not going to be a perfect parent. That also does not give you the right to sin against your children because you can't be a perfect parent.
Right.
Okay? It's not giving you a license to, dare I say, abuse, neglect, berate, shame, and harm your children to make you more comfortable.
Right.
Okay, we are here to love our children, to disciple them, to honor them the way that Jesus does, the way that Jesus honors us and shares that with us. And so while on the one hand, it's like we have grace from God, from that perfectionism, our children also don't need us to be perfect. That's not what they need. If that's what they needed, Jesus certainly wouldn't have given them us, right?
Right.
But he did. Our children don't need perfect parents. They need Jesus. They need parents who say, hey, we need Jesus. Yeah. Here's how we connect with Jesus. Here's how let me show you in the best way I can what love and connection looks like, because Jesus does it a bajillion times more. Yeah,
absolutely. That grace, it's unmerited favor, meaning you didn't earn it and you're getting favor anyway. It's in the Bible where God said, with Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. It doesn't say that he was righteous. It was credited to him as righteous. And the word righteous is to be made right. It's God. I love this. It's Romans 4, I think 17. And it says, God raises the dead to life. He takes that which does not exist and calls it into being. Basically, it's a miracle, and that's our salvation. It's raising the dead, and it's only done through Christ.
Yeah, we have the privilege and the responsibility to show our children that.
Right.
And then that's all we have to do. And I know that, in short term is like, oh, that's all we have to do. No, really, that's all we have to do.
Yeah.
Is say, I'm not good enough. Jesus is good enough. And because he did the work and he put me here, I just want to bypass me, just right to him, we're just the guiding lights. We're just like, exit this way.
Point to Jesus.
It's not me, it's him.
Yep.
And we want to do that through grace-based parenting, which is not a parenting style that many of us, especially millennial parents, we're accustomed to. And there's a lot of us out there trying to do it, but not knowing how. That's where coaching comes in, to help show you how to do something that wasn't discipled to us.
Right.
Right. And to know that we can create that safe space where our children know they're loved, that even when they fail, we get to mirror Jesus's unconditional love and build that foundation of trust and emotional safety where our kids can express their emotions, their struggles, all those mistakes without fear of being met with anger, punishment, and rejection. Because while all that fun stuff was happening in the Old Testament, there was always a greater plan. We were never going to make it. We were never going to make it. We needed that blanket of grace tossed upon us, and we get to show our children that that's what we have in Christ.
Absolutely.
No matter how many times, we fail, which is, like you said, it's going to be hourly, it's going to be daily. When you're connected to Jesus, your behavior improves, right?
Yeah.
Our behavior, the fruits of the Spirit, take root in us, and our outward behavior starts to reflect closer to Jesus than it did when you were a non-believer or when you were stuck in that sin cycle, whatever, pick your poison. When you were stuck in that sin cycle, you weren't reflecting Jesus the way we were meant to. So you had to repent so that now that I've repented of that sin cycle, I can more closely reflect, the intentions of Jesus. He can use me in that way. This same type of phenomenon is going to occur in our children.
Yeah.
To a point that you made earlier, grace-based parenting is not a free pass for our kids to behave poorly without consequences. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that. They think, well, if you're parenting with grace, then you're not really, you're not giving your kids consequences. And that's just not what's happening. What happens there is that the parent has probably actually slipped into what we call permissive parenting, where you're so afraid to punish, you're so afraid to traumatize, you're so afraid of the methods you were grown up with that instead of disciplining, you shy away from it. And really, it's just from fear. And then you end up being permissive. And
that's perfect.
Parents will find that they have to overcorrect because they're like, oh, shoot, my kids are going crazy. Now I need to overcorrect. And what do they overcorrect with? Those harmful strategies that they were brought up with because they don't know how to find that gray area, right?
Right.
That middle.
We've talked about essentially 3 different types of parenting. You said the permissive parenting, and then we talked in the beginning. We talked about how more like we grew up with the guilt and shame based parenting, and then the grace based parenting. If you go too far either way, it's a problem. But yeah, I would agree that the grace based is more in the middle. We're not being permissive, but we're not guilting and shaming them either. Is there consequences? Yes. There are consequences for every single decision that you make. And we have to teach our kids that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to yell and scream at them and lose control of myself. We have to remember that we're talking to little sinners. When we talk about sin, we don't look at it how God looks at it. God calls it evil. And when you and I think of evil, we think, like murder and, just really evil, horrible things. But that's not the way God looks at it. While those things are, yes, evil, God sees even our lightest disobedience as evil. And that's where our children are at when they don't have Jesus. And we have to guide them to him. And we do the same thing. We have evil in us. It's sin. It is bad. It is as bad as we think it is. There's a lot of people that like to kind of brush their sin under the rug. And it's like, oh, well, what I do isn't really that bad. And they end up getting like that. There's that, I think it's a parable. And there's a Pharisee over here and he's kind of praying to God. He's like, oh, thank you that I'm not like that sinner over there that's doing all these horrible things, And the other guy's just like praying, Lord, I shouldn't even be talking to you that I'm so sinful. And it's like, we're supposed to be the second guy. When talking about this parenting stuff and leading our children to Christ, I think a really important thing is our motivation for salvation, our motivation for following Jesus. Is it, oh, well, God will take care of me, and God will, he'll stop all the bad things from happening to me if I just follow Jesus, or I don't have to go to hell. I get to go to heaven. And these are bad reasons to want to follow Christ, or I want to have good, that's the whole works-based side of things. And instead we want grace. We want Jesus because he is true. We want Jesus because he is the one from God. I deserve hell. And I am humbled by what Jesus has done for me.
What you mentioned is that prior type of relationship. I can, I want this so I don't go to hell. I want to go to heaven. I want, Jesus to bless me and do good things for me. That is a transactional relationship, and there is no authenticity there. There is no relationship there. That was my relationship with Christ for the first 20 years of my life. Yeah. And that's not a relationship. I didn't know Christ. I prayed the prayer you're supposed to pray every day in 4th grade. I was terrified of going to hell. I thought it was going to be horrible.
I did too.
Yeah, I've been saved 100 times by now, and I just couldn't believe. I couldn't believe that if I just trusted in Christ, that's all I needed to do. And the reason I couldn't believe that is because I had no relationship with Christ.
I was the same way. I prayed that prayer thousands of times from the 2nd grade up until like midway through high school. And then I was just like, you know what? Forget this. I was probably a junior, senior in high school. And I was just like, no. And then I played around with atheism. And I called myself an atheist. I'd go to church and I'd ask questions that I knew they didn't have an answer to or whatever.
Just to go argue. I can see that.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I did. And then God got a hold of me and completely turned my life around. And I've been different ever since.
When we treat our relationship with Christ as transactional, there's probably a high chance that we're treating our relationships with our children as transactional as well. And they're learning from a young age that relationships are transactional. That is their belief system. They're growing up with that truth.
Yeah.
And that is not the truth. The truth is that in relationship with Christ, that's when you see his value. That's when you see your lack of value without him, right? Because of course, I come from a position where I believe every human is worthy. We are born with worth because Jesus was worthy. We are his. Yeah. And I believe that my child is Jesus's. He is his. Whether my child has accepted him into his heart or not, that is going to be between him and Christ. But Christ gave me this child, and I'm raising this child. I want him to know that he doesn't have to perform for me because he doesn't have to perform for Christ. So why would I want to make this requirement? And I am by no means perfect at this. That's not my point. But if I'm to show my child how a relationship looks like, I can't have a transactional relationship with my kid. Behave well and you'll do this. Yeah. If you do this, then I won't get mad. If you behave this way,
that's good.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm their first window into what Christ looks like.
Right.
I'm the closest thing they've got here on this earth. And we're not going to do a great job of it, which is the point in case in point that we have to point to Christ. We have to point to our flaws. We have to point our kids to Christ. And that authentic relationship is what brings our children to Christ. Not that I love all the things. I love Sunday school. I love going to church. I love small group. I love doing the things and doing the outreach I love all that stuff. But those are just things. Those are just, they're like the sorry. They're empty actions until you are bolstered with the Spirit. Yeah. And then your fruits, like you just said, they're the byproducts. Those things will happen through the fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with our children, with their misbehaviors. If they're having a bunch of misbehaviors, we have to pour in our values and our connection. And we too will see the fruits of their behavior will improve. We can't do that without putting in the work. We can't demand. We can't command. That's not, where is our authority to do that? We have none.
God is so gracious to us, and that he gives so many examples that we can see and touch, physical examples of relationships, so that we can see the relationship that we're supposed to have with him. And the same one that he gives with our children is with our spouse. If you look at marriages today, and you look at the world view of what a marriage is supposed to look like, it's absolutely transactional. It's I just don't love them anymore. I just don't feel that way anymore. If my relationship with my wife is based on a feeling, we would have gotten divorced multiple times, or at least years ago. I mean, easily, there's no way we would have made it past year one for us. I mean, it was tough. You're not always going to feel it. You're not always going to feel good doing it. But you do it anyway, and you pursue that relationship anyway. My relationship with my wife, I do not love her because she loves me. I love her because I love her, period. It's circular. It's a terrible argument, but it's it's the truth. I am pursuing her because I believe God has willed me to do that. I pursue my children, not based on a feeling, because sometimes I don't feel so nice to my children.
Right.
But I pursue them regardless of what they do. And I pursue my wife regardless of what she does, just like God pursues me regardless of what I do. Just like with my wife, it doesn't, my wife doesn't, just because I love my wife regardless, doesn't mean that she could go do whatever she wants. Just because I love my kids doesn't mean they can just go do whatever they want. Same thing with our relationship with Christ.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up. Like, we pursue them, he pursues us, we pursue our children, not for what they can do for us, not for how good they've been, but rather because that's the responsibility that has been placed on us. That is the responsibility that has been placed on you to love your wife.
Yeah.
Our responsibility as parents to disciple these children. It's going to be hard, and it's not meant to be easy. Like, we live in a broken world. It's meant to be uncomfortable. Yeah, I love that, how you talked about that pursuing. And when our kids mess up again and again and again, just as Jesus pursues us again and again, like that's our place. That's our place, is to pursue that child and not let that child go get lost, but to seek after them and to bring them back to the safety that we can provide them. And then showing them that we can only do that because Jesus provides us with that same safety. You know, he is our shepherd, and we are his sheep. Our children are our sheep, and it's our job to make sure they don't fall off the cliff and go die somewhere, but we don't do that by beating the sheep. Like, that does not make the sheep want to hang out with the shepherd. Like, no, you have to have the snacks and the goodies. Like, you have to be someone who's worth investing a relationship in. And you can't do that when you're operating out of fear, guilt, punishment, manipulation, and without the grace of Christ. You just can't do it.
Exactly. Cool. Well, I think that was excellent, Amy. I've really enjoyed having you on. You've given a lot of great insight in what it means to be a parenting coach, and we'll leave some links in the description if you guys want to check Amy out a little bit more.
For the parents out there who are like navigating the misconceptions about how to discipline their child according to the Bible, or they're experiencing the tension with parenting or their spouse surrounding disciplining their children and parenting in that grace area, and even the ones who would just like to sin less while parenting their children, I've actually developed a mini course, and it's called Shifting from Perfectionism and Control to Connection and Grace. I really just want parents to be able to parent from a place that aligns with their faith so that they truly can lead their children to Christ in the most authentic way possible.
Thanks for listening, and next video, we'll be back in John's Gospel. See y'all next time.